So I'm all for parental choice, but I would say grammar schools are not a silver bullet that's going to solve all our problems. And I think this is where the left and the right become a little bit irrational. I think that the left have an irrational hatred of grammar schools. And I think that the right and the Conservative Party have an irrational love of them, thinking it's going to solve all the problems. And the $6 million question is this, Darren, why can't we have first-class schools for all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Kevin, I agree with that. But what would you like to see in education then? Do you support free schools, for example?
I'm all for experimentation, so I'm for free schools. I'm for religious schools. I'm for grammar schools if people want them. I think, to be honest with you, Darren, in the ideal world, I quite like the idea of the comprehensive ideal. But I accept completely that the dream of comprehensive education hasn't always been successful and there's been major problems. So I wouldn't want to, run away from that conversation. So I'm up for the debate about how we can have the best education system possible. But I remain to be convinced, Darren, that grammar schools are the answer, because there's a couple of really classic arguments here. I mean, effectively what you have with year 6 in primary school is it's the rich parents who get to tutor their kids, who've got lots of money, who prep them for the test, are often the people that get into the grammar school in the first place. So even though there was an argument in the past, maybe in the 1970s and 60s, where certain working class kids who were very bright were fortunate and they had the escape valve of a grammar school to get to, I accept that. And those kids were lucky enough to escape and climb up the ladder.
Yeah.
I do think it's like snakes and ladders. It swings and roundabouts. There's arguments both ways there, Darren.
OK, and that argument is made, though, isn't it, where the tutoring argument, that argument's made in relation to the abolition of private schools as well, where people say, well, you could just say to your rich parents could say to tutors, I want you to ensure that my child gets into the best possible state school, and you can game the system no matter what way, right? So this form of selective education, life is unfair sometimes, Anne. Isn't that just what we've got to remember?
Well, life is unfair, and the one thing I did agree with that my opponent said was that there is no single silver bullet. There is no single silver bullet to solve this, and we do need to spend a great deal of time, in my view, and resource and determination on trying to get some of those ghastly, failing inner city comprehensives up to scratch so that children can actually benefit from that sort of education. But I would say this about tutoring. I think that very much used to be the case. But increasingly now, education authorities are designing papers that test intelligence and reasoning. And you can't actually be taught intelligence. You can be taught expected answers, but you can't always be taught how to work things out. So I think there are answers to that. But also, I mean, you're right. Life is a bit unfair. And certainly in Kent, there was a pattern where the wealthier parents sent their children to prep schools in order to get them to pass the 11 plus to get into grammar schools. But then that raises the question, why is it that the prep schools can do what the primaries can't? Why?
Yeah, and I think ultimately, if I were a parent, I would do everything to ensure that my child had the very best education. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. But where we are agreed, all of us, I think, would be that levelling up is nothing without improving our schools. But that we'll have to end it there, unfortunately. That was the teacher and commentator Kevin Rooney and the former Brexit Party MEP and grammar school girl, as I said there, Ann Widdecombe.